I was just the maid, invisible, silent, serving wine to her perfect guests while she bragged about her perfect marriage, her perfect children, her perfect life. But when her husband's eyes met mine across that dining room, everything shattered. Because I knew the truth. I knew what happened in the shadows of that perfect house. And that night, with one look, he knew that I knew. My name is Sara, and this is the story of how one family's darkest secret became impossible to hide. Before I take you into that night, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. These real-life stories need to be heard, and your support means everything. Now, let me tell you what really happened. My name is Sara, and for 3 years, I was invisible. Not literally, of course, but when you're a maid in a house like the Wellington estate, you might as well be a ghost. You move through rooms, straightening pillows, polishing silver, refilling crystal glasses, and people look right through you. They talk over you, around you, sometimes even about you, as if you're just another piece of furniture that happens to move. I didn't mind it, actually. Invisibility gave me something most people never get: the truth. The Wellington mansion sat on 5 acres of manicured perfection in the wealthiest neighborhood of our town. 3 stories of white stone and tall windows that sparkled in the sunlight, surrounded by gardens that Victoria Wellington obsessed over like they were her children, which, in some ways, they were more loved than her actual children. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I started working there in the spring of 2021. I needed the job desperately. My mother's medical bills were drowning us, and the Wellingtons paid well, very well. Enough that I swallowed my pride, put on the uniform, and learned to keep my eyes down and my mouth shut. Victoria Wellington was exactly what you'd imagine when you picture old money trying desperately to look like new money. 42 years old, but fighting every year with personal trainers, dermatologists, and enough Botox to freeze her forehead into permanent smoothness. She wore cream-colored pantsuits and silk blouses, always with her signature pearl necklace. Her blonde hair was colored and styled twice a week, never a strand out of place. She was also the most exhausting person I had ever met. "Sara, these pillows are crooked again. I've shown you 12 times how I want them arranged. A large one in back, the medium ones at an angle, the small ones. Are you even listening to me?" "Yes, Mrs. Wellington, I apologize." "Don't apologize, just do it correctly." She'd already turned away, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting her necklace by a millimeter. "I don't understand why this is so difficult. My last maid understood immediately." Her last maid had quit after 6 months. I'd learned this from the housekeeper, Margaret, who'd been with the family for a decade and had watched 4 maids come and go. Margaret had given me crucial advice on my first day. Keep your head down, do exactly what she says, and never, ever comment on family matters. Mrs. Wellington has very specific ideas about how things should look. How things should look, not how they should be. That should have been my first clue. The house itself was stunning, I'll admit it. Marble floors in the foyer, a chandelier that probably cost more than my mother's house, a curved staircase that looked like something from a movie. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, furniture that you were almost afraid to sit on, and abstract art that Victoria loved to discuss with guests, even though I'd once heard her Google the artist's name before a dinner party. My daily routine was precise, timed to the minute. Victoria left a list every morning on the kitchen counter, written in her sharp handwriting. 7 a.m., prepare breakfast. 8:30 a.m., tidy main floor. 9 a.m., laundry. 10:30 a.m., upstairs bedrooms. 12 p.m., lunch preparation. And so on, until 6 p.m. when I was finally released, unless there was a dinner party or event. Those nights, I'd be there until midnight, serving and cleaning up after people who never quite looked at my face. But here's what Victoria's lists never included: the truth I saw in the spaces between tasks, like how 8-year-old Sophie Wellington would flinch whenever her mother raised her voice, how 12-year-old Marcus had stopped smiling sometime in the past year, his face settling into this careful, neutral expression that no child should master. And how Victoria inspected her children before school every morning like they were soldiers preparing for inspection, fixing Marcus's collar, straightening Sophie's hair bow, criticizing their posture. "Stand up straight, Sophie. Nobody respects a girl who slouches." "Marcus, is that really what you're wearing? You look sloppy." And then there was James Wellington. Mr. Wellington was 45, tall and slim with graying hair at his temples that actually made him look distinguished rather than old. He was a corporate attorney, something with mergers and acquisitions that I never fully understood. He left early and came home late, which seemed to suit everyone in the house just fine. But I noticed things about him, too. I noticed how his jaw tightened when Victoria corrected the children, how he'd started eating breakfast in his study rather than at the table with his family, how sometimes when he thought no one was looking, he'd watch his kids with this expression of such profound sadness that it made my chest ache. He was always polite to me, not in the performative way Victoria was when guests were around, but genuinely polite. He'd say thank you when I brought him coffee, ask about my day sometimes, apologize if he'd left his study messy. Small things, but in that house, they felt enormous. It was 3 weeks before Victoria's big dinner party, when everything started shifting. I was cleaning the main floor bathroom when I heard Victoria on her phone in the hallway. She had this particular voice she used with her friends, higher-pitched, artificially warm, dripping with humble brags. "Oh, you know how it is, Jennifer. James just got promoted to senior partner. Yes, again. We're absolutely thrilled, though of course it means even more travel for him, poor thing. And Marcus made the honors list again. Sophie's piano teacher says she's the most talented student she's ever had." I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and saw myself rolling my eyes. I shouldn't have, but the contrast between the performance and the reality was too much. The reality was that James looked exhausted all the time. Marcus's honors were achieved through tears and late-night studying while Victoria hovered over him, criticizing every answer. And Sophie's piano practice sessions ended with the little girl's hands shaking and Victoria's voice sharp with disappointment. But Victoria was already planning her masterpiece, a dinner party to celebrate James's promotion. 20 guests, catered food from the most expensive restaurant in town, the house polished until it gleamed. She wanted everything perfect, she told me, Margaret, and the gardener in a meeting that felt like a military briefing. "I want everything perfect. These people need to see what success looks like. I want them to look at my family and understand what it means to have it all together." She smiled, but her eyes were hard as stones. That's when I realized something that chilled me. Victoria didn't love her family. She loved the idea of them, the image they projected, the envy they inspired in others. They weren't people to her. They were accessories, like her pearl necklace and her designer furniture. And they knew it. I saw it in the way Marcus's shoulders dropped when he walked into a room and saw his mother. In the way Sophie had started hiding her drawings because Victoria criticized them. In the way that James had stopped even trying to have conversations at dinner. The dinner party was scheduled for Saturday night. As the date approached, Victoria's control intensified. She had me clean rooms that were already spotless, rearrange furniture, polish silver that gleamed. She snapped at the children constantly, sent back 3 dresses before choosing what she'd wear, and filled the house with tension so thick that you could feel it pressing on your skin. The night before the party, I stayed late to help with preparations. I was in the kitchen when I heard a crash from upstairs, then Sophie crying. My hands froze on the glance of wine I'd been polishing. Victoria's voice cold and sharp. "Stop crying. Perfect little girls don't cry over nothing. What will our guests think tomorrow if your eyes are puffy?" Sophie was 8 years old. I set down the glass and realized my hands were shaking. This wasn't right. None of this was right. But what could I do? I was just the maid, invisible, silent, serving wine to her perfect guests, while she bragged about her perfect marriage, her perfect children, her perfect life. But when her husband's eyes met mine across that dining room,
everything shattered. Because I knew the truth. I knew what happened in the shadows of that perfect house. And that night, with one look, he knew that I knew. My name is Sara, and this is the story of how one family's darkest secret became impossible to hide. Before I take you into that night, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. These real-life stories need to be heard, and your support means everything. Now, let me tell you what really happened.
The thing about being invisible is that people forget you have eyes and ears and a functioning brain that connects the dots they think are safely hidden. I'd been collecting dots for 3 years. It started small, the way these things always do, little moments that felt off, but not quite enough to name. Like the time I found Sophie's artwork in the trash. Beautiful crayon drawings of flowers and butterflies, with Victoria's handwriting scrawled across them. Sloppy, unacceptable. The girl was 7 years old at the time. Or the afternoon I walked past Marcus's room and heard Victoria inside. Average is not acceptable in this family, Marcus. Do you want people to think you're stupid? Do you want to embarrass us? I'd peeked through the crack in the door and seen the boy's math test. He'd gotten a 92, an A-. But it was the things I'd seen in recent months that had started keeping me up at night. 3 months before the dinner party, I'd been dusting the upstairs hallway when I heard Sophie practicing piano. The little girl was working through a difficult piece, stumbling over the same measure repeatedly. I could hear her frustration, the way her playing got faster and sloppier as she tried again and again. Then Victoria's voice, ice cold, "You're embarrassing yourself and me. My daughter should be better than this." "I'm trying, Mama." "Trying isn't good enough. Do you know what people will think when they hear you play at the recital? They'll think I've failed as a mother. Is that what you want?" I'd stood frozen in the hallway, desk cloth in hand, as 8-year-old Sophie began to cry. Stop that crying immediately. Weak girls cry. Strong girls practice until they get it right. Again, from the top. I'd walked away, my stomach churning. But what could I do? Report that a mother was pushing her daughter too hard in piano? That wasn't abuse in any legal sense. It was just cruel. And cruelty, I'd learned, wasn't always against the law. The incidents had multiplied. I'd seen Victoria grab Marcus by the chin, forcing him to look at her while she critiqued everything from his posture to his word choices. I'd watched her inspect Sophie's closet, throwing out toys she deemed baby-ish, ignoring her daughter's tears. I'd heard her tell James that he was gaining weight, that he was becoming soft, that he needed to represent the family better. And I'd seen what it was doing to all of them. Marcus had developed a stutter that only appeared at home. Sophie had started pulling out her eyelashes, a nervous habit Victoria punished her for, which only made it worse. And James had started drinking more. Not enough to be drunk, but enough that I'd started finding empty Scotch bottles in his study trash can with increasing frequency. But it was the things I'd discovered 2 weeks before the dinner party that had started keeping me up at night. 2 weeks before the dinner party, I'd been dusting James's study, a room Victoria rarely entered, because she'd declared it his space, in a tone that made it clear she found it beneath her. It was messy in the way that lived-in spaces are, with legal papers scattered across the desk, coffee mugs forming rings on the wood, books stacked in precarious towers. I was emptying the trash when I noticed the drawer of his filing cabinet was slightly open. I almost pushed it closed without thinking, but something made me pause. A label on one of the folders, visible through the gap. Documentation. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But I did. Inside that folder was a record that made my blood run cold. Journal entries in James's handwriting, dated and detailed, photographs, dozens of them, taken discreetly,
Screenshots of text messages and recordings labeled by date, stored on a small hard drive. James had been documenting everything. Every incident of Victoria's emotional abuse, every time she berated the children, every manipulation, every cutting remark, every moment of psychological cruelty. He'd been building a case, meticulously and secretly, for months. I flipped through the pages. There were notes about Sophie's anxiety, Marcus's declining mental health, the pediatrician's concerns about stress. There were photographs of Sophie's pulled-out eyelashes, of Marcus's bitten-down fingernails, screenshots of Victoria's text messages to James. "Your son is weak. Sophie embarrassed me today. You're raising failures." And at the very back, paper clipped together, custody documents, divorce papers not yet filed, a lawyer's business card. James Wellington was planning to leave, and he was making sure he'd take his children with him. I closed the folder with trembling hands and shoved it back into the drawer, my heart hammering. This was it. This was the proof that something was genuinely, seriously wrong in this house. James saw it. He was trying to save his kids. But why hadn't he done it yet? Why was he waiting? I got my answer the next day. I was serving lunch when Victoria's phone rang. She answered in that honey, sweet voice she reserved for important people. "Hello, Catherine. How wonderful to hear from you." A pause, then Victoria's laugh, sharp and bright. "Oh, James is up for the Partnership Council? Well, of course he is. We're so blessed." "Yes, the vote is next month." "Absolutely. This could change everything for our family." She caught my eye and waved me away impatiently. I left the room but stayed close enough to hear. "It's the final step, Catherine. Once he's on the council, we're talking about a completely different tier of society. The clubs, the connections, everything. No, I've been preparing for this for years. Everything has to be perfect. Everyone has to see us as the ideal family. That's why this dinner party is so crucial." And suddenly I understood. James was waiting. He couldn't file for divorce now, not with this Partnership Council vote coming up. In their social circle, divorce would be scandalous. It would cost him the promotion, the position, everything. So he was documenting, building his case, waiting until after the vote to make his move. He was trapped. They all were. But there was something else. Something I'd pieced together from the fragments I'd witnessed. James wasn't just waiting for the vote. He was looking for an outside witness, someone neutral, someone who'd seen the abuse firsthand and could testify to it, someone who couldn't be dismissed as a bitter ex-husband making false accusations. The documentation was thorough, but family court judges had heard it all before. Divorcing parents always accused each other of terrible things. He needed corroboration. He needed someone who had no stake in the outcome. He needed someone like me. But he had no idea that I'd found his folder. He didn't know that I'd connected the dots. And I had no way to tell him. Victoria watched everything, controlled everything. Any conversation between us would be noticed, questioned, weaponized. So we existed in this strange parallel awareness. James building his case, in secret, me knowing his secret but unable to acknowledge it, both of us watching Victoria's cruelty intensify as the dinner party approached, as the pressure mounted, as the performance she was preparing became more demanding. The night before the party, I found Sophie in the garden after dark. She was sitting in the dirt in her white nightgown, crying silently, her hands covering her face. "Sophie? Honey, what are you doing out here?" She looked up at me with swollen eyes. "I can't do it, Sara. I can't be perfect enough. I try and I try, but Mama's always angry. I'm always wrong." I sat down next to her. Rules and employment be damned. "You're not wrong, sweetheart. You're a wonderful little girl." "Then why does Mama hate me?" The question hung in the night air. devastating in its simplicity. I wanted to tell her the truth, that her mother was incapable of real love, that the problem wasn't Sophie, but Victoria's impossible standards, that help was coming. But I couldn't. Not yet. Your mother doesn't hate you, I said carefully. But sometimes grown-ups have problems that make them act in ways that hurt people. It's not your fault, Sophie. None of this is your fault. She leaned against me, and I held her while she cried. Above us, I could see James standing at his study window, watching us. Our eyes met across the darkness. In that moment, I made a decision. Tomorrow night, at the dinner party, if the opportunity came, if James needed a witness, if the truth needed to be spoken, I would be ready. I would stop being invisible. The question was, would I get the chance?
The day of the dinner party arrived like an impending storm. Victoria was up at 5 in the morning, her footsteps sharp and purposeful on the marble floors. By the time I arrived at 6, she'd already left me a list 3 pages long. Every glass needed to be polished again, every surface re-cleaned. The flowers in the entryway needed to be rearranged because 2 of the roses were opening too quickly. This night has to be flawless, she told me, her eyes bright with an intensity that bordered on manic. Everyone who matters will be here. They need to see what we've achieved, what we are. What you look like, I thought, but didn't say. The caterers arrived at 2. Victoria hovered over them like a hawk, criticizing plating choices and seasoning before they'd even begun cooking. I watched Marcus and Sophie sit quietly on the stairs, already dressed in their evening clothes. Marcus in a little suit that looked uncomfortably stiff, Sophie in a navy velvet dress with a white collar that Victoria had chosen. They looked like dolls, beautiful, lifeless dolls. Remember, Victoria instructed them, her voice that particular blend of sweetness and steel. You will greet guests politely. You will answer questions with full sentences. You will not interrupt adults. You will be seen and not heard unless spoken to. Marcus, no fidgeting. Sophie, smile. A real smile, not that nervous thing you do. Sophie's lips trembled as she forced them upward. James emerged from his study at 5, already in his tuxedo. He looked handsome but exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes that no amount of grooming could hide. When Victoria saw him, her smile was cold. Finally, I was beginning to think you'd forgotten we had guests coming. She circled him, adjusting his bow tie, smoothing his lapels. This is your night, darling, your celebration. Try to look like you're enjoying it. Something flickered in James's eyes, anger, maybe, or despair, but he just nodded. Of course. By 6:30, the house was transformed. Candles flickered on every surface, the dining table gleamed with crystal and china, soft classical music played from hidden speakers. It looked like a photograph from a luxury magazine, perfect and pristine and utterly cold. Victoria checked her reflection one last time, adjusting her emerald necklace, a dramatic upgrade from her usual pearls. This is it, she whispered to herself, though I was close enough to hear. This is what winning looks like. The guests began arriving at 7. They came in pairs and groups, all dressed in expensive clothes, carrying wine bottles that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I stood near the door with a tray of champagne, offering glasses, invisible as always. Victoria, darling! A woman in a silver dress air-kissed Victoria's cheeks. The house looks absolutely stunning. Oh, you're too kind, Caroline. We just wanted something intimate to celebrate James's achievement. Please come in. Let me introduce you to everyone. I moved through the growing crowd, refilling glasses, collecting empty plates from the hors d'oeuvres, watching. Victoria was in her element, gliding from group to group, her smile never faltering, her performance flawless. And it was a performance. I could see it now with crystal clarity, every gesture rehearsed, every word calculated, every laugh timed for maximum effect. Marcus,
Come here, sweetheart." Victoria beckoned her son over to a group of guests. The boy walked stiffly, his face carefully neutral. "Tell Mr. Patterson about your academics. Marcus made high honors again this semester." "Congratulations, young man. You must be very proud." Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, sir." "I study very hard, because he knows excellence is the only option in this family. We don't believe in mediocrity, do we, darling?" "No, mother." She released him, and he escaped back to the stairs where Sophie sat, both of them watching their mother work the room like actors watching a masterclass. At 8, we moved to the dining room. I helped serve the first course while Victoria held court at the head of the table, James at the opposite end. The conversation flowed with wine and laughter, and Victoria was radiant. That's when the bragging really began. "You know, we've been so blessed. James's promotion to senior partner is just the latest achievement. He's being considered for the partnership council now." "Victoria," James interrupted quietly, "maybe we should—" "Don't be modest, darling. These are our friends." She turned back to the table. "The vote is next month, and everyone we've spoken to has been so supportive. It's going to change everything for our family." I was pouring wine at the far end of the table, but I could feel the tension radiating from James's end. "And the children," Victoria continued, warming to her subject. "Marcus is at the top of his class. Sophie's piano teacher says she's the most talented student she's ever had. We've worked so hard to give them every advantage, every opportunity." I moved down the table, refilling glasses. Victoria was fully engaged now, her voice growing more animated. "I think the key to a successful family is standards, high standards. You have to expect excellence from your children, from your spouse, from yourself. Too many people today accept mediocrity. They let their children be ordinary. They let their marriages become comfortable rather than extraordinary." I reached James's end of the table and began pouring wine into the glass of the woman next to him. "That's why I'm so proud of what we've built here. A family that represents the very best of what's possible when you refuse to settle. Perfect children, a perfect marriage, a perfect life. It takes work, of course, constant vigilance, but the results speak for themselves, don't they?" She gestured toward Marcus and Sophie, who sat at a small side table, eating in silence. They looked miserable. "I mean, just look at them," she said, her voice dripping with pride that felt more like ownership. "Aren't they just perfect?" I moved to James's glass. My hand was steady as I poured, but my heart was racing, because I could see his knuckles were white where he gripped his fork. I could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. I could see, for the first time in 3 years, that he was at his breaking point. As I finished pouring, he looked up. Our eyes met, and in that single moment of connection, everything that had been unspoken between us suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. He knew that I knew. I saw his documentation, his plan, his desperate attempt to save his children. And more than that, I saw his silent question. "Will you help me?" The room seemed to freeze. Victoria's voice continued in the background, still singing praises of her perfect family. But James and I were locked in this moment of absolute understanding. I'd spent 3 years being invisible, silent, powerless. But invisibility had given me something precious, the truth. And James needed someone to speak that truth. I gave the smallest nod, so small that anyone else would have missed it. But James saw it. His eyes closed for just a second, relief and fear and gratitude washing over his face. When he opened them again, he set down his fork with deliberate care. "Victoria, we need to talk, now." The room went silent. Victoria's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. "Darling, we're in the middle of dinner." "Now," James repeated, standing up. His chair scraped against the floor, loud in the sudden quiet. "Everyone, I apologize, but I need to speak with my wife. privately. He looked at me one more time. Then he looked at his children, who were watching with wide, frightened eyes. And I knew this was it. The perfect family was about to shatter. The only question was whether I had the courage to help pick up.
The silence that followed James's demand was suffocating. 20 guests sat frozen, forks halfway to mouths, wine glasses suspended in midair. Victoria's smile had turned into something brittle and dangerous, a mask that was cracking at the edges. "James," she said, her voice still trying for lightness but missing by miles, "you're being dramatic. Our guests can wait 5 minutes." James was already moving toward the hallway, his posture rigid with barely contained emotion. "Unless you'd prefer to have this conversation right here." It was a challenge, a line drawn in the marble floor. Victoria's eyes darted around the table, calculating. Her entire performance was unraveling, and she knew it. But she was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to maintain the illusion. "Of course, darling." Her laugh was glass-shattering. "Please, everyone, continue eating. Will just be a moment. You know how husbands can be, always picking the most inconvenient times to discuss household matters." But nobody laughed. Nobody even moved. The perfect veneer had cracked, and everyone could see the darkness seeping through. Victoria stood, smoothing her dress, and followed James toward his study. But before she disappeared down the hallway, she turned back and caught my eye. Her gaze was pure ice. A warning. Stay out of this. I should have. Every instinct I'd developed over 3 years of invisibility told me to keep my head down, clear plates, refill wine glasses, pretend nothing was happening. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I set down my wine bottle and followed them. The study door was closed but not latched. I could hear their voices immediately, Victoria's sharp and James's low and controlled. I stood in the hallway, my heart hammering, knowing I was crossing a line I could never uncross. "Embarrassing me in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what you've just done? These people are important, James. Your career?" "My career? That's what you care about? Not our children? Not our marriage? Just how things look to your friends? Don't you dare twist this around. I have given everything to this family. Everything. I've made you look good, made the children presentable, maintained this home. You've terrorized our children. How dare you?" "I have documentation. Journals, photographs, recordings. Months of evidence of what you've been doing to them. To us." A pause. Then Victoria's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. "You've been spying on your own family?" "I've been protecting my children from their mother." "Is that what you call it? And what exactly do you plan to do with this documentation? James, divorce me? Take the children? Do you really think any judge will give you custody? I'm their mother. I've sacrificed everything for them." "Sacrifice? You've made their lives hell because they can't live up to your impossible standards. Nothing is ever good enough. They're never enough. And they're breaking under the weight of your expectations." I heard footsteps, pacing, Victoria's heels clicking on the hardwood. "You're being hysterical," she said finally, her voice shifting to something manipulative, almost sweet. "The stress of the promotion has gotten to you. You're not thinking clearly. Let's go back to our guests, finish this lovely evening, and we can discuss this tomorrow when you're more rational." "I'm done pretending, Victoria." "You're done? You're done? After everything I've done for you, I made you who you are, James. I made this family what it is. Without me, you'd be nothing. The children would be nothing. And you want to throw it all away because you've decided to have some kind of midlife crisis? This isn't about me. This is about Marcus and Sophie. They deserve better than this." "Better than me?
Better than a mother who pushes them to be their best, who refuses to let them be ordinary? They deserve a mother who loves them for who they are, not who you want them to be. The words hung in the air, devastating in their simplicity. Get out, she said quietly. What? Get out of the study. Go back to your guests, finish this lovely evening, and then tomorrow you and I are going to have a serious conversation about your future with this firm, with this family, with this life. Because if you think you can destroy everything I've built over your feelings, you're mistaken. Victoria? I said get out. Something crashed. A lamp, maybe, or books from a shelf. I heard James's footsteps moving toward the door, and I quickly stepped back, pressing myself against the wall. The door opened. James emerged, his face pale but resolved. He saw me standing there and stopped. Sara, how much did you hear? Enough, I whispered. We stared at each other. In his eyes, I saw desperation and determination warring against each other. He needed help. He needed someone to back up his claims, to be the outside witness that would make his case credible. I need to know, he said, his voice barely audible. What you've seen, what you know, I need... He stopped, closed his eyes. I can't do this alone. This was the moment. The decision I'd been building toward since I found that folder, since I held Sophie crying in the garden, since I watched Victoria destroy her children's spirits day after day. I could walk away, keep my job, stay invisible. Or I could speak. I'll testify. Whatever you need. I'll tell the truth about what I've seen. The relief that washed over his face was profound. Thank you, he breathed. Thank you. Behind him, Victoria appeared in the doorway. She looked at me, at James, at our conspiratorial proximity, and her eyes narrowed with understanding. Sara, she said, her voice deadly calm, I think it's time for you to go home. You're no longer needed tonight. Actually, James said, turning to face his wife, Sara is exactly what we need. She's been here for 3 years, Victoria. She's seen everything. And she's going to help me make sure our children are safe. Victoria's face went white, then red. You would trust the maid over your own wife? I trust someone who's witnessed your abuse over someone who denies it exists. The word hung between them. Abuse. Victoria's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she knew it. Her perfect family, her spotless reputation, her absolute control, all of it was collapsing around her. This isn't over, she hissed. You have no idea what you've started. It's been over for a long time, James said, sadly. I just finally found the courage to end it. He turned back to me. The guests need to go home. Can you help me? I nodded. Together we walked back toward the dining room, leaving Victoria standing in the hallway, her perfect evening in ruins. But as we entered the dining room, where 20 guests sat in uncomfortable silence, I realized something. The hardest part was still ahead. Telling the truth was one thing, living with the consequences was...
The guests left within 20 minutes. James made a simple announcement when we returned to the dining room. I apologize, but we're dealing with a family matter. Thank you for coming. His voice was steady, final. No room for questions. They gathered their coats in awkward silence, avoiding eye contact, desperate to escape the wreckage of the Wellington family's perfect evening. I watched them file out, whispering to each other, already composing the stories they'd tell tomorrow. Victoria's reputation, her most precious possession, was being destroyed in real time. She stood in the foyer like a statue, her face a mask of barely controlled rage, not even pretending to say goodbye to her guests. When the last one left, she turned to James with eyes that could have cut glass. I want her out of this house. Now. She pointed at me. Sara stays, James said quietly. The children need her. because that's what we'd found when we entered the dining room. Marcus and Sophie huddled together at their small table, both crying silently. Sophie had her arms wrapped around her brother, and Marcus was whispering something to her, trying to be brave even though his whole world was shattering. I'd gone to them immediately, while James dismissed the guests, knelt beside their table and held both their hands. "What's happening?" Sophie had whispered. "Is Daddy leaving us?" "No, sweetheart. Your daddy is trying to protect you." "From Mama?" Marcus's voice was so small, so broken. I looked into their terrified faces and made a choice that wasn't mine to make, but that needed making. "Your mama has been hurting you. Not with her hands, but with her words and her rules and her impossible expectations. Your daddy sees it now, and he's going to make sure you're safe." Sophie burst into fresh tears, but they were different somehow. Tears of relief, mixed with fear. Now, with the guests gone, James turned to his children. "Marcus, Sophie, go upstairs and pack a bag. Some clothes, your favorite things. We're going to Grandma's house tonight." Victoria laughed, sharp and bitter. "You can't just take my children." "Watch me." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer right now, and tomorrow morning we're filing for emergency custody. Sara has agreed to provide testimony about what she's witnessed. My documentation is already with my attorney. This ends tonight, Victoria." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll destroy you, your career, your reputation, everything. My children's well-being is worth more than any of that." It was the first time in 3 years I'd seen him look truly strong. Victoria turned to me, her fury finding a new target. You think you can betray me after everything I've done for you? I gave you a job when you needed one. I paid you well, and this is how you repay me?" I thought about backing down, about all the years of biting my tongue, making myself small, being invisible. But then I looked at Marcus and Sophie on the stairs, watching us with wide eyes, and I found my voice. "You didn't do anything for me, Mrs. Wellington. You paid me to witness your abuse and stay quiet about it. But I can't stay quiet anymore. Those children deserve better than to spend their lives trying to be perfect enough for a mother who will never be satisfied." Her hand flew up. I think she was going to slap me, but James caught her wrist. "Don't," he said. "It's over, Victoria. The perfect family you wanted never existed. All you built was a prison for people who loved you." She wrenched her arm away, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Not remorse, exactly, but something like recognition. A glimpse of awareness that she'd destroyed everything that mattered while chasing an impossible image. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. "Get out," she said. "All of you. Get out of my house. It's our house, but we're leaving anyway. Come on, kids." Marcus and Sophie came down the stairs with their hastily packed bags. James took Sophie's hand and I took Marcus's. Together, the 4 of us walked out the front door of that beautiful, terrible house. The night air was cool and clean. Sophie looked up at the stars and said, "Are we really going to be okay?" James knelt down and pulled both his children into his arms. "Yes, it's going to be hard for a while, but yes, we're going to be okay." And looking at them there, this broken, brave family beginning the long journey towards healing, I believed him. The divorce took 8 months. James got primary custody based on the documentation he'd compiled and my testimony about what I'd witnessed. Victoria was granted supervised visitation, which she rarely used. She moved to another state, where I heard she eventually married someone equally obsessed with appearances. The partnership council vote. James withdrew his name from consideration. He said some things were more important than career advancement. He took a different position, less prestigious, better hours, that let him be present for his kids.
I found a new job working for a family that treated me like a human being rather than furniture, but I stayed in touch with James and the children. Sophie stopped pulling out her eyelashes. Marcus's stutter faded. They're teenagers now, and while they're not perfect, thank God, they're happy. They're real. As for me, I learned something important. Invisibility might keep you safe, but visibility can save lives. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth about what you've seen. That dinner party was 5 years ago. People still talk about it sometimes. The night the Wellington family's perfect image shattered in front of 20 witnesses. But I don't think about the scandal or the gossip. I think about Sophie's smile when she plays piano now for herself, not for anyone else. I think about Marcus's confidence as he heads off to college, studying what he loves instead of what he's expected to love. I think about James, who chose his children over his career and never regretted it. And I think about that moment of eye contact across the dining room when two people who'd been silent for too long finally found the courage to speak. Sometimes that's all it takes to change.